It didn't start with silence, or distance, or even suspicion, not really. It started with something I couldn't name at first, like a shift in temperature in a familiar room. The kind of change you don't notice until you suddenly realize you're freezing. That Thursday evening was normal on the surface. I had just gotten home from work, changed into sweatpants, and microwaved leftovers she'd left in the fridge. Nora texted me a few hours earlier saying she was having a girls' night at her cousin Chloe's place. Some kind of wine and candle thing, supposedly. I didn't think twice. We trusted each other. At least I thought we did. Around 11:45 p.m. The front door opened. I heard the rustle of a coat, the soft clink of keys being dropped in the ceramic bowl by the entry. When she stepped into the living room, she was smiling, tired, but smiling. Too tired for wine night, maybe. Not tired enough to miss the small detail. "Hey, babe," she said, a little too brightly, setting her purse down on the arm of the couch. "Chloe sends her love. We drank way too much and played that dumb game with the cards again. You would have hated it." I smiled, but my smile froze halfway. There was something off. She leaned in to kiss me, and that's when I smelled it. Something floral and sharp. Not the vanilla and amber notes she usually wore, but a stronger perfume I didn't recognize. Sweet, expensive, and not hers. Or at least, not any scent I'd ever seen on her dresser. "You smell different," I said without thinking. Her eyes flicked up, just for a second. "Oh yeah, Chloe gave me this travel spritz thing to try. I think it's from her Birchbox or something." She waved a hand dismissively, already walking into the kitchen. "Way too strong, right?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, not really you." She didn't respond. I stared at the back of her head for longer than I meant to. She poured herself a glass of water, took 2 sips, and came back out to sit beside me. Her legs folded beneath her on the couch, tucked comfortably close like always. But her body didn't lean into me like it used to. She just sat still. We watched an old episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and she laughed once or twice. But the laugh sounded rehearsed, like she was performing normal. The next morning, she was already out of bed before me. I found her in the kitchen in leggings and a sports bra, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. "I'm gonna go for a jog before work," she said, tying her hair into a messy ponytail. That was new. She hadn't jogged in over a year. I nodded, pretending not to notice. "You want me to throw your laundry in later?" She looked up briefly. "Sure, thanks." After she left, I grabbed the laundry basket and dumped the contents onto the bed. Half her clothes, half mine. Socks, tank tops, a couple of her sleep shirts. That's when I saw it. A single men's sock. Black, thin, high-quality fabric. A dress sock. One I didn't recognize. It was partially inside out and wedged between a pair of her leggings and one of her cropped hoodies. For a long moment, I just stood there, sock in hand. My stomach twisted in a slow, nauseating way. It wasn't mine. Not even close to the kind I wear. And it didn't belong to any of my friends. Nobody had been over in weeks. It looked new, almost freshly worn. Like it had just come from someone's suitcase. I laid it on the edge of the dresser. Not to accuse, not to confront, but to see what would happen. When she came home that night, she saw it immediately. I watched her clock it from across the room as she dropped her keys. She walked over, picked it up casually, and laughed, a little too loudly. "Oh my God," she said, waving the sock in the air. "This is so random. I must have grabbed it by accident when I was at Chloe's. Her cousin's friend was doing laundry there last night. Some guy named Malcolm, I think. His stuff was all over the place." She tossed the sock into the laundry basket and moved on like she hadn't just told a lie. It was too smooth, too ready. "Right?" I said. "Makes sense." She smiled, relieved I think that I didn't push further. But I saw it then. The way her shoulders dropped a fraction too quickly. The way she looked past me instead of at me. A microsecond of tension that came and went like a shadow on a wall. And I felt something crack open inside me. Not rage. Not yet. Just a slow, widening space where certainty used to live. That night, I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling while she slept. I listened to the rhythm of her breathing, the familiar softness of it. But it no longer brought me comfort. Instead, my mind replayed that laugh, that sock, that perfume, a dozen tiny things I'd brushed off in the past few weeks. The early morning jogs, the increasing phone privacy, the sudden password change on the shared tablet, the new lace bralette she said she bought on sale, but I'd never seen her wear around the house. I told myself not to spiral. I told myself maybe there really was a Malcolm. But even as I told myself that, I realized something worse. I didn't believe her. Not anymore. And once that thread snapped, I couldn't stop myself from pulling at the rest. Once the seed of doubt was planted, it didn't stay a seed. It grew fast, wild. I didn't even have to water it. My memory did that for me. Over the next few days, things I'd shrugged off before started blinking red in my mind like warning lights I'd chosen to ignore. Like her new running habit. It started 2 months ago. At first, I was supportive, encouraging, even. She'd struggled to stick with exercise routines before. So when she started jogging every other morning and said she felt recharged afterward, I was happy for her. But she didn't track anything. No smartwatch, no Strava, no playlist talk. She said she was keeping it simple, clearing her mind. Okay, fair enough. Except, one morning I got curious and offered to join her. Just once. She hesitated. I remember the way her brow furrowed for a second too long. "Oh," she'd said. "You don't have to. I actually like the solitude." That stung more than it should have. I didn't push. But now I couldn't unhear the tone. Like I was intruding. Then there were the showers. Always right after she got home. Nothing strange about that. What was strange were the calls. Quiet ones. Sometimes while the water was running. I'd hear muffled talking through the door, barely above the sound of the spray. One time, I leaned in closer and caught a faint laugh, followed by silence the second I shifted my weight on the floorboard. I told myself it was her sister, or a friend, someone catching up during me time. But why lie about it when I asked later? "Oh, I was just watching a reel," she said once. "You know, the funny ones with voiceovers?" Except I hadn't heard any music. And Nora always had her volume up when she watched those. This time, nothing. Another time, she said she'd been humming to herself. That lie felt so absurd it almost made me laugh. Almost. Then came the photos. We share a cloud account, or we used to. I'm the one who set it up. I noticed one day that her photo count had dropped by a few dozen. Gone. Just like that. When I asked about it, she brushed it off. I needed to make space. My phone's been lagging. That part was true. Her phone had been slow lately, but she didn't delete *TS, or memes, or random grocery lists. No, what vanished were selfies. Little *TS of her out and about. The ones she used to send me midday, smiling from some cafe or her office. Those were gone. I didn't say anything then, but something inside me started keeping track. It got worse the day I picked her up from the gym. She texted me, "Car won't start. Can you come get me?" Of course I did. She said she'd wait outside. It was only a 12-minute drive. But when I got there, I couldn't find her. I parked and walked into the entrance, scanned the lobby. Nothing. After 5 minutes, I called. "Oh, I'm on the other side," she said quickly. "By the side exit. Sorry, I thought I mentioned that." I rounded the building and saw her just stepping out. Not sweaty. No gym bag. Her hair was too perfect. Makeup untouched. I didn't say a word then, but I remember the building. It didn't have a side exit for the gym. That side was connected to a co-working space. Maybe she was using the gym as a cover. Maybe she'd never stepped inside at all. And suddenly, everything clicked. The irritability, the distance, the way she stopped asking about my day, or stopped pretending to care when I asked about hers. Her answers became one-liners, emotionally efficient. No warmth, no detail. It wasn't stress. It wasn't burnout. I'd been telling myself that for weeks. It was something else, or rather someone else. What I once dismissed as coincidences now felt deliberate. Pattern too clean to be accidental. One night, While folding laundry again, I found another stray item. This time, a hoodie I didn't recognize. Oversized. Dark gray. Definitely not mine. It didn't have a tag, but it smelled faintly of that same sharp cologne I'd caught on her 2 weeks ago. When I asked about it, she squinted and said, "Oh, Chloe lent it to me. I got cold after wine night." Wine night. Again. She had an answer for everything. Always. But her eyes didn't meet mine when she said it. Later, she was in the shower. I stared at the hoodie on the bed for a long time. Then I turned it inside out. Found a small stitched name near the lower hem. T. Miles. Not Chloe's. Not anyone I knew. Certainly not a cousin. That was the moment it stopped being theory. I was no longer piecing together possibilities. I was staring at a fact. Still, I didn't confront her. Something told me not to. Maybe I wasn't ready to hear the lies get louder. Maybe part of me wanted to collect everything, every broken thread, before I let the whole thing unravel. So I played along. I asked about her day like usual. I offered to cook dinner more often. I let her sleep in on Sundays even when I couldn't. But behind every word, my mind was running loops. The weirdest part? She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she didn't care. The more effort I made, the more withdrawn she became. As if kindness repelled her now. Like guilt was pushing her further away. She started sleeping with her phone under the pillow. She never used to do that. If it buzzed after midnight, she'd pretend not to hear it. But she'd glance at the screen with just her eyes, like she was scared I might ask. And her smile, God, that smile, used to come so naturally. Now it looked like it was being held up by strings. I don't know when I stopped seeing her and started seeing through her. But I do remember the night I knew, without question, that whatever was happening wasn't new. It had already been happening. I was just catching up. She went for a run that night. Said she'd only be out 30 minutes. I watched her leave. Didn't follow. Didn't track her. I just stared at the door for a long time after it closed. And when she came back, she had no sweat. No flushed cheeks. No labored breathing. I offered her water and she said no. She went straight to the shower. Locked the door. Stayed in there for 40 minutes. When I passed by the bathroom, I heard her whispering. Not humming. Whispering. I didn't catch the words, but I didn't need to. I knew what it sounded like when someone was trying to protect a lie. And suddenly, I realized something painful. I had already become a ghost in my own house. Someone she walked past instead of walked toward. Placeholder. A safety net she didn't think she needed anymore. She had already stopped giving, assuming I'd stay. That assumption, it was about to collapse. There's a strange kind of clarity that comes when you realize you've been lied to for long enough. Not the angry kind. Not the dramatic, shout it from the rooftop kind. Something quieter. Almost still. Like the silence after a storm, when everything around you is soaked and still standing, but not quite right. That was me. Standing still. Watching. Listening. Waiting. I had stopped asking questions because I already knew I wouldn't get answers. Not real ones. I'd stopped offering affection because I didn't know who I was offering it to anymore. She felt hollow. Or maybe I did. But even then, I hadn't seen it for myself. So when she mentioned another night out with the girls, this time for someone's birthday, I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. I just nodded, smiled, and said, "Have fun." She didn't even bother pretending anymore. Didn't double-check the lie, didn't fake the details. It was like she knew I wouldn't push, so she stopped trying to keep it neat. That was a mistake. Her ride showed up around 7:15. She wore a dress I'd never seen before. Form-fitting, low-cut, deep emerald. It looked expensive. She said it was a loan from Chloe. Said they were doing dinner and karaoke. I said nothing. Just kissed her cheek, which she leaned away from just enough to make it awkward. When the door shut, I waited exactly 10 minutes before grabbing my keys. I didn't have a destination. Not really. I just had instinct and the quiet conviction that whatever I found, I needed to see it with my own eyes. Not just hear the suspicion. Not wonder. Not guess. I needed truth. Raw, unfiltered. I drove to the bar where she said they'd be, but it was nearly empty. A Tuesday night dive, nothing special. I asked the bartender if there was a party or reservation under the name she'd mentioned. He shook his head. Dead night, he said, flipping a rag over his shoulder. Nothing like that booked. I nodded, thanked him, walked out. My hands were shaking, but not from nerves, from knowing, from the confirmation that this night, this story was hers, but I didn't exist in it. I drove toward downtown, figuring I'd either find something or come back with nothing. I had no plan, just a need. That's the thing about betrayal, you stop needing logic. You start needing evidence. That's when I saw her. It was pure luck, or fate, or maybe just timing. I was stopped at a light near the corner of 9th and Alder, and I saw her across the street. Not in a bar, not in a restaurant, but outside a small boutique hotel, standing under the soft glow of a string light canopy. She wasn't alone. A man stood in front of her, tall, athletic build, dark coat. I didn't recognize him, but she did. Her body language said everything. She laughed softly, her hand resting on his chest. Not like a friend, like a partner. He leaned in close and whispered something. She tilted her head back slightly and smiled with her whole face. The kind of smile I hadn't seen in months. Then, without hesitation, she kissed his neck. Slow. Familiar. He didn't flinch. Neither did she. There was no rush, no sense of hiding. Just comfort. Routine. It was rehearsed. I sat there frozen, both hands on the wheel, watching as the light turned green and cars behind me honked once. Then again. I didn't move. Couldn't. I just stared. And that image burned into my brain like acid. That wasn't a first-time mistake. That was a second life. One I wasn't part of. Eventually, they walked inside together, arm in arm. I didn't follow. There was no point. What was I going to say? What confrontation would make a difference? What apology would undo what I'd seen? There was no ambiguity. No sliver of doubt. No, maybe I misread that. It was all clear. I drove home slowly, like I was underwater. My phone buzzed once, her text. Heading home soon. Chloe is wasted, lol. I didn't respond. I didn't even open it. Instead, I sat in the driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. I turned off all the lights, sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just existed. That's what betrayal does. It hollows you out without ceremony. It replaces the oxygen in the room with something heavier. Something you can't name. She came home an hour later. I pretended to be asleep. She crept in, took off her heels quietly, went to the bathroom. I could smell the perfume again. Stronger this time. More expensive. More foreign. Not hers. She crawled into bed, facing the other direction. Like always, I stayed still, but my eyes were wide open. We didn't speak the next morning. She said she was running late and kissed the top of my head. That was the last time I let her touch me. I started moving differently after that. Slowly. Intentionally. Not because I didn't know what to do, because I wanted to do it right. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want her to hurt. I just wanted out. Quietly. Without her knowing I was already halfway gone. But something changed in her too. Maybe she felt the shift. Or maybe she knew I had seen something. Either way, she started trying harder. Small things. She left handwritten notes on the counter again. Love you. Have a great day. Dinner's on me tonight, Red Heart. She started cooking more. Asking about my meetings. Laughing at my jokes like she hadn't zoned out of our conversations for the last 2 months. She even wore that vanilla perfume again. The one I used to compliment. But it was too late. I knew the truth now. And truth doesn't get untold. I didn't bring up the hotel. I didn't mention the man. I didn't show her the proof I didn't need to record. Because it wasn't about catching her anymore. It was about reclaiming myself. About detaching without drama. I started clearing out drawers in the garage. Reorganizing files. Separating what was mine from what was shared. 1 inch at a time. Quiet. Methodical. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and she thought it was just a phase. She had no idea she was already living with a version of me she couldn't reach anymore. A version that had stopped hoping for the marriage to bounce back. A version that saw clearly now. I had been giving her the benefit of the doubt while she gave someone else everything I'd earned. The man I saw her with? He wasn't a mistake. He was a routine. He was her plan B while I kept pretending we were still on plan A. And now I was the one with a plan. In the days that followed, she shifted. Not drastically, but enough that someone paying attention could see it. The same woman who had spent the last few months slowly fading away began trying to revive the version of herself that used to care. Or more accurately, the version of herself that looked like she cared. It began with breakfast. One morning, out of nowhere, she was in the kitchen at 7 a.m. flipping pancakes and humming along to some playlist from our early dating days. Songs we hadn't listened to in years. Nora used to dance around the kitchen barefoot to them, stealing bites from my plate and laughing in that way that made the whole apartment feel alive. Now it felt rehearsed. I sat at the table, pretending to scroll through emails. She slid a plate toward me and smiled like nothing was fractured. "I figured we could have a real breakfast for once," she said, brushing hair behind her ear. I looked at the plate. Perfectly shaped pancakes. Fresh strawberries arranged neatly. Her version of nostalgia. "Thanks," I said, and took a bite. I tasted guilt, not syrup. Later that day, she left a note in my car. Slipped it between the center console and gear shift. I noticed it on my lunch break. Just a torn piece of stationery with her handwriting in soft blue ink. "I miss us. Let's find our way back." I stared at it for a long time. She was trying to perform love again. But what she didn't realize, what she couldn't realize, was that I had already stepped off the stage. There was no way back. Not to the version of us she was pretending to want. Still, I played along. Quietly, calmly. No confrontations. No questions. I nodded when she told me about her day. I smiled when she suggested we watch a movie. I let her put her feet in my lap like old times, even though it made my skin crawl now. Every gesture from her felt like someone knocking on a door to a house that had already burned down. She didn't know. She didn't know I had already separated our finances, that I had created a new checking account, rerouted my direct deposit. I even opened a P.O. box across town. Small steps, quiet ones, defensive ones. I wasn't running, I was preparing. She also didn't notice the documents disappearing. My passport, birth certificate, car title, all packed into a fireproof folder I stashed in the trunk of my car. I started backing up my laptop to an external drive, clearing old emails, changing passwords. She didn't ask. She was too busy lighting candles at dinner. That week, she started cooking again. Not just quick meals, actual effort. Seared salmon, creamy pastas, paella. She asked if I wanted to learn a new recipe with her one night, and I said sure, even though the idea of cutting onions next to her made my chest tighten. "Do you want to pour the wine?" she asked, handing me a bottle of red. I turned it over in my hands. Same wine from that night, the night she came home wearing someone else's cologne. I poured us each a glass. We cooked in silence, with music playing softly in the background. She kept glancing at me, gauging, searching. I smiled where I needed to. I played the role. But under the surface, I was somewhere else entirely. She was trying to pull me back into a version of us she didn't realize she had already led. I'd buried that version quietly, and I wasn't interested in digging up the corpse just to dance with it one more time. On Thursday, I asked for the weekend off work. Told her I was thinking of visiting an old college friend up north. She nodded absently, flipping through her phone. "That sounds good. You could use the break." She didn't ask which friend. She didn't ask where. Because she wasn't worried about losing me. That's the thing about betrayal, it makes people overconfident. Once they've done the worst to you and you haven't burned the house down in response, they think you never will. They think your silence is forgiveness. What she didn't know was that my silence was strategy. The following Sunday, she left early to get groceries. I stayed home, watched the window as she pulled out of the driveway, then waited exactly 10 minutes before opening her laptop. I wasn't looking for confirmation. I already had it. But I needed to see if her performance extended into the digital world too. It did. Her search history was clean. Suspiciously clean. Not just no recent tabs, no old ones either. Like the slate had been scrubbed on purpose. The trash bin on her desktop was empty. As if she never deleted a single file. No photos. No autofill logins. No digital crumbs of any kind. She hadn't just closed the door. She'd bleached the room. She was hiding the wrong way. Overcorrecting. I sat back in her chair, staring at the blank desktop, wondering how she thought this was going to end. Did she believe I would forget? Did she think int asterisk Macy could be rebuilt with roasted vegetables and dusty playlists? That night, I left my phone on the nightstand screen up. I watched her glance at it. She asked, "Waiting for someone?" I shrugged. "Just keeping it nearby." She didn't say anything, but I saw something flicker behind her eyes. A small fear. Good. I didn't want her to panic. I just wanted her to know something had changed. That the person lying next to her wasn't the version of me she remembered. The version of me that trusted her. That version was gone. What surprised me the most during this time was how painless it had become to detach. I thought it would feel like grief, like mourning, but it didn't. It felt like air rushing back into my lungs after being underwater for too long. Every time I chose not to ask a question, not to take her bait, not to respond with anger, it felt like freedom. Every time she leaned in closer while I leaned further back inside myself, I felt stronger. She mistook my quiet for distance. It was actually control. I think the turning point, where it became undeniably obvious even to her, was when I started sleeping earlier. On purpose. Lights off. Phone off. No TV. She'd walk into the room expecting conversation, or a kiss goodnight, and find me already facing away, still as stone. One night she whispered, "Jake, are we okay?" I didn't move. She waited a beat longer, then added, "I feel like you're somewhere else lately." But I just muttered, "Just tired." She didn't say anything else. A few minutes later, she rolled over and stared at the ceiling. I could feel the tension in her silence, the fear, the questions building up behind her closed lips. But she didn't ask again. She couldn't afford to, because she knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. She knew she had gone too far, and now she was trying to dance in reverse. But there's no choreography for that. You can't cheat and then perform sincerity and expect applause. She wanted me to forgive something she refused to name. She wanted the version of us where things just work. But I wasn't rebuilding anything with her. I was already drawing the exit map. It was the silence between us that made her nervous. She had been trying everything, old routines, familiar scents, leftover jokes from when we still knew how to laugh together. I let her try. I didn't resist. But I didn't participate either. I just watched her spin in circles, hoping I'd reach out and join the dance. I didn't. The illusion was cracking. She could feel it even if she wouldn't say it out loud. So she made one last move, her most desperate one yet. It happened on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after I saw her with him. She came home with takeout. Thai food from that little place we used to love on 5th. The same order we used to share when we couldn't afford anything more expensive. It was a play from the past. Something designed to tug on my nostalgia, to remind me of when things were easy. She set it on the counter and said, too casually, "We should eat in the living room tonight, like we used to." I didn't argue. I didn't say anything. I just followed her, plate in hand, and sat down while she queued up a show we hadn't watched together in months. A sitcom. One we both used to quote. But her laugh was wrong. Forced. I didn't join in. Halfway through the second episode, she muted the TV. I didn't look at her, but I felt her eyes on me. "I need to tell you something," she said. I stayed silent. She hesitated, then added, "I'm pregnant." I turned to her slowly, heart steady. "Whose is it?" Her breath caught. The words hadn't surprised me. It wasn't her announcement that rattled me. It was the timing. The way she dropped it into the room like a match on dry grass, hoping I'd panic, hoping I'd react. But I didn't. I don't know," she said. I nodded. "Of course you don't. Jake, please don't look at me like that." This isn't how I wanted to tell you. I was scared. Of what? I asked, my voice calm. That I'd figure out it's not mine? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. I just watched. I thought it might bring us back together, she whispered. There it was. Her last card. Not truth. Not accountability. Just leverage. I stood up and carried my plate back to the kitchen. She didn't follow. I rinsed it, placed it gently in the sink, and stared out the window above the faucet for a while. The backyard looked smaller now, like the world around me had shrunk since the first lie. Eventually, I spoke. So what happens now? She was still on the couch when I turned around. Hands folded tightly in her lap, shoulders caved in like she was trying to disappear. I don't know. I'll get a test. We'll find out. No, I said. You'll get a test. I already know. The next morning, she tried to act normal. Made coffee, put on makeup, kissed my cheek. I let her. But while she drove to her supposed appointment, I was meeting with a lawyer. I brought everything. Copies of emails I'd forwarded to myself from her account before she locked me out. Photos I'd taken of the mystery hoodie with someone else's name stitched inside. *TS of her location history from the night she said she was just getting fresh air. I had every receipt. And I brought them not because I wanted revenge, but because I didn't want her lies to write the story of our ending. The lawyer didn't say much at first, just flipped through the pages and gave a low whistle at one point. Then he looked up at me and asked, "You want a clean break? Or do you want to make it hard for her?" I paused, thought about it. "Clean," I said, "but undeniable." He nodded. "We can do that." When I got home that evening, she was already sitting at the table. A sealed envelope lay in front of her. Her eyes were red. She didn't say a word as I walked past her. I poured a glass of water, leaned on the kitchen counter, and waited. Finally, she said, "It's not yours." I nodded. Didn't think so. Silence stretched between us like a tightrope. She didn't cry this time. Maybe she knew it wouldn't work. Maybe she finally realized I wasn't reacting because I wasn't surprised. Or maybe, in some part of her, she'd been hoping for that answer too. Hoping it would give her a clean break too, even if she didn't want to admit it. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "I leave tonight." She blinked. "What? You don't have to move. Not yet. I'll give you time. But I'm not staying another night here." Her voice broke a little. "Jake, wait. Can we talk this through, please?" "There's nothing left to talk about," I said, standing straight. "You tried to fix this with a lie you thought would bind me to you. A baby you weren't even sure was mine. You didn't come clean, you gambled." I was scared. "No," I said calmly. "You were losing control." I didn't shout. I didn't slam a door. I just grabbed the overnight bag I'd packed 2 days earlier and walked out. Left her sitting there with her sealed envelope and 1,000 unsaid things clinging to the silence like ghosts. I drove with the windows down. No music. No GPS. Just road. The highway felt endless in the best possible way. Somewhere past midnight, I stopped at a small motel 2 towns over. Paid in cash. Slept without dreaming. The next morning, I watched the sun rise from a balcony that smelled like mildew and freedom. For the first time in months, I felt light. She didn't call, didn't text. Maybe she understood now. I had given her every opportunity to confess, to heal something, but she used every one of those chances to manipulate. The baby lie was her final attempt, the nuclear option, and it failed. In the week that followed, I didn't go back. I met with the lawyer again. We drafted everything: division of property, asset separation, documentation of infidelity, the pregnancy test results. Everything was backed by paper now. There was nothing left to interpret. She emailed me once. No subject. Just one line. "I never meant to lose you." I didn't respond, because the truth is, she never really lost me. She just threw me away.